Bienvenue sur ma chaîne.
Développement personnel.
Par la parole de Dieu.
Que sa lumière vous accompagne.
Soyez bénis
Où que vous soyez, likez, partagez, restez connectés.
Ici on grandit, on s'élève,
On est transformé.
Long before we talk about outcomes, long before we talk about doors opening or closing, and long before we talk about any battle you can see with your eyes, I want to take you straight to the battlefield most people never address, the one that takes place in silence, the one that doesn't leave visible bruises, but can quietly drain your joy, blur your discernment, and slowly erase your sense of self. Because there is a kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. There's a kind of heaviness that vacations don't heal. And it often comes from one source: living too long as a version of yourself that is not fully true. Some of the deepest battles we face are not against people, not against circumstances, not even against obvious opposition. They are internal battles, daily, private negotiations between who we truly are and who we feel pressured to become. Between the identity God designed and the identity the world rewards. Between the voice of the Spirit and the noise of expectations. And the truth is, many people don't lose their lives in one dramatic collapse. They lose themselves in small compromises. They don't wake up one morning and decide to abandon their authenticity. They simply begin to edit themselves. They adjust their tone. They soften their convictions. They over-explain. They second-guess. They become more acceptable, more strategic, more careful. And gradually they grow skilled at being impressive, yet unfamiliar with being free. You can function like that for years. You can be productive. You can be dependable. You can achieve. You can even be admired. But deep inside, something starts to dim. Your voice becomes quieter. Your instincts become blurred. Your passion becomes cautious. You begin to move through life performing competence while privately carrying a tension you can't quite name. And what makes this so painful is that God did not design you to be a polished imitation. He did not create you to be an edited copy of what is already celebrated. God is not interested in mass production. He forms individuals with precision. He weaves calling into personality. He places gifts inside your nature. He allows certain trials not to destroy you, but to shape you. Even your sensitivities, even your scars, even your story, these are not random details. In God's hands, they become part of your assignment, which means the very things you were tempted to hide might actually be the things God intended to use. The things you were trained to minimize might actually be the things that carry your authority. The qualities that don't fit neatly into other people's templates might be the exact evidence that you were never meant to live by their templates in the first place. But here's the problem. We live in a world that constantly rewards performance. It rewards what looks safe, what looks familiar, what looks controllable. It rewards people who know how to blend, how to read the room, how to keep it smooth, how to keep it professional, how to keep it nice. And if you're not careful, you start confusing wisdom with shrinking. You start confusing maturity with silence. You start confusing peace with self-erasure. And then, sooner or later, life brings a moment that exposes everything. A moment where the pressure rises, where the stakes are real, where the cost is tangible, where you can no longer rely on appearance, where you can no longer survive on what you've been projecting. Because in those moments, borrowed confidence fails, borrowed identity collapses, borrowed strength disappears. That is often the moment God begins to call you back to yourself. Not in a selfish way, not in a prideful way, but in a holy way, a grounded way, a truthful way. Because authenticity is not just a personality trait, it is spiritual alignment. It is inner integrity. It is living with one heart, one voice, one direction. It is refusing to be divided, publicly one thing, privately another. And that kind of wholeness takes courage because authenticity always costs something. It may cost approval. It may cost access. It may cost certain relationships. It may cost comfort. But it also protects something priceless, your inner authority, your clarity, your peace, your ability to hear God without the static of constant self-betrayal. So today, before we go any further, I want you to let this land. You were never called to live as a carefully managed version of yourself. You were called to live as the person God formed, clear, steady, truthful, and anchored. Because when you stop performing and start aligning, you become dangerous in the best way. Not loud, not chaotic, not reckless, just unshakably yourself. And that is where everything begins. We live in a world that teaches us very early on how to wear masks. Long before we even dive into the story of David, long before we talk about armor, and long before we face any visible giants, we need to talk about something far more intimate, far more silent, and deeply personal. We need to talk about that inner tug of war that so many people carry every single day without ever giving it a name. It is the exhausting tension between who we are at our very core and the polished version of ourselves we present to the world. There is a battle raging that no one else can see. It isn't a fight against external enemies, nor is it a struggle against visible circumstances. It is an inside job. It is the fierce battle between genuine authenticity and the endless exhaustion of bending over backwards to fit in. It's the clash between the profound truth of our God-given identity and the crushing pressure to conform. Ultimately, it is the fight between God's calling on our lives and the heavy expectations of people who want to mold us into something else entirely. Far too many people go through the motions of an entire lifetime without ever stepping into the fullness of who they truly are. They function. They check the boxes. Sometimes they even achieve what the world calls success. They play their parts perfectly, meet everyone's expectations, adapt seamlessly to their environments, and survive broken systems. But deep down, beneath the surface, something is on standby. A dormant voice, a distinct uniqueness, a brilliant light that has never been given full permission to shine. And yet, God does not do mass production. He doesn't create carbon copies. He doesn't hand out interchangeable, one-size-fits-all destinies. Every single person carries a completely unique blueprint, a distinct fingerprint made up of a specific combination of experiences, sensitivities, natural gifts, and deep wounds that have been transformed into wisdom. Every step of your journey is a training ground. Every single thing that makes you different is actually a clue to your true calling. The trap of the borrowed armor, but from a very young age, we are taught to file down our rough edges, to soften anything about us that might disrupt the status quo, to shrink ourselves so we don't intimidate others, to silence the very things that might challenge the norm. The world teaches us that to be accepted, you have to blend in. To be validated, you must look like everyone else. To climb the ladder, you have to toe the company line and adopt pre-approved models of success. And little by little, almost imperceptibly, we trade our raw, beautiful truth for a watered-down, more palatable version of ourselves. This phenomenon is incredibly subtle. It rarely happens through blatant force. It happens through sheer repetition. It happens in the sideways glances, in the passive-aggressive remarks, in the heavy silences, in the constant, exhausting micro-adjustments we make to keep the peace. Until one day, you wake up and realize you know exactly how to play the game and function in the system. But you've completely forgotten who you actually are. And that is where the real conversation begins. Because the audacity to simply be yourself isn't about arrogance. It isn't some shallow self-help buzzword, and it certainly isn't a loud, obnoxious rebellion. It is an inner reclamation. It is the profound decision to strip it all back to the absolute essentials. To look in the mirror and ask, what has God actually placed inside of me? What is my true way of thinking, speaking, acting, leading, loving, and serving? What part of me is completely genuine, and what part is just a strategic survival mechanism? Authenticity as a spiritual weapon, let's be honest. Authenticity demands immense courage. Because authenticity leaves you exposed. It removes the safety net of playing a character. It doesn't let you blend seamlessly into the background. It requires you to fully own your strengths, but also to make peace with your limitations. It means accepting the hard truth that not everyone is going to understand you. Not everyone is going to applaud you. And yes, certain doors will slam shut in your face precisely because you refuse to contort yourself to fit through them. But here is what we so often forget. Authenticity is not a vulnerability. It is a weapon. It is a spiritual weapon, a strategic weapon, a weapon of absolute clarity and divine alignment. It is the weapon that allows you to move forward without feeling torn apart inside. It is what anchors you, allowing you to walk through raging storms without losing your sense of self. It makes you unshakable when the circumstances around you are constantly shifting. The real danger in life isn't being rejected by other people. The ultimate danger is rejecting yourself. The real tragedy is living a life so perfectly tailored to external expectations that you can no longer recognize your own voice. And let me tell you, when you lose your voice, you lose your inner authority. You lose your spiritual compass. You lose that deep, transcendent peace that only comes from being in total alignment with God. That is why this question is so urgent today. The question isn't, how can I be more popular? Or how can I be more persuasive? Or how can I curate a better image? The real question is, am I aligned with the identity God specifically designed for me? Am I being a faithful steward of what He planted inside my soul? Am I dragging around an impressive looking armor that belongs to someone else? Or am I using the authentic tools that actually fit me? Removing the mask, there are seasons in life where God allows confrontation, not to humiliate us, but to reveal us. There are seasons where you suddenly realize you simply cannot take another step carrying borrowed protection. You can no longer operate using behaviors that feel completely foreign to your spirit. You can no longer survive the suffocating compromise between who you actually are and the mask you wear for the world. And the moment you realize that, true freedom begins. The freedom to stop playing a part. The freedom to stop chronic people-pleasing. The freedom to say a hard no when necessary. The freedom to maintain your quiet dignity under immense pressure. The freedom to refuse to match manipulation with more manipulation. The freedom to remain deeply consistent, even when it costs you something dear. The audacity of authenticity isn't about becoming rigid or stubborn. It's not about rebelling just for the sake of it. It's about coming into alignment. It's realizing that your identity is your most strategic battlefield. It is understanding that the way God wired you is not a mistake to be fixed, but a superpower to be refined. Perhaps today, before we even talk about David and his armor, before we look at the physical giants looming in your life, the very first giant you need to slay is this one, the sheer terror of being fully, unapologetically yourself. Everything starts there. We live in a world that teaches us very early on how to wear masks. A mask to be accepted by the crowd. A mask to get the promotion. A mask so we don't rock the boat. A mask to survive toxic hierarchies. A mask to ensure we aren't too much for some or not enough for others. And the higher you climb, whether professionally, socially, or even spiritually, the stronger the temptation becomes to wear a heavy armor that was never meant for you. But the question God is asking you right now is piercingly simple. Who are you when the armor comes off? The lesson of David and Saul to truly grasp this, let's look at David facing Goliath in 1 Samuel 17. Young David stands before King Saul, ready to fight the giant. Saul, operating out of human logic, tries to dress David in his own royal armor. The scripture says, "Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around, because he was not used to them. 'I cannot go in these,' he said to Saul, 'because I am not used to them.' So he took them off. This moment is overflowing with symbolism. Saul's armor represents the imposed standard. It represents human authority, corporate conformity, the logic of the system, and the illusion of safety. But David understands a profound, life-saving truth. What protects someone else might just paralyze you. He strips off the heavy armor. He grabs what he knows, his staff, his shepherd's sling, and 5 smooth stones. He stays radically true to who he is, a shepherd boy. And it is precisely from that place of authentic identity that he secures the victory. Today, our armors are invisible, but they are heavy and they are real. We wear the armor of crippling perfectionism, the armor of self-censorship and silence, the armor of overachieving to prove our worth, the armor of the perpetual, "I'm doing great" smile, the armor of fake, shallow spirituality, the armor of shape-shifting to fit whatever room we walk into. We adopt behaviors that aren't ours to appease a boss, to dodge conflict, to avoid being the outcast, to fit neatly into a mold. But any armor that isn't tailored for you will eventually exhaust you. It will suffocate you, warp your spirit, slow your progress, and ultimately, it will block you from stepping into your divine destiny. Many people mistake authenticity for fragility. They couldn't be more wrong. Authenticity is a formidable, strategic strength. David didn't reject Saul's armor out of foolish pride. He rejected it because he intimately understood his own mechanics. He knew how to wield a sling. He knew how to aim under pressure. He knew his advantage was agility and lightness. Authenticity is simply knowing how you operate best. Scripture reminds us, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. When you imitate others, you dilute your own calling. When you fully own who you are, you activate God's grace upon your life. Even in religious circles, the masks are everywhere. We mimic how other people pray. We adopt their spiritual jargon. We copy their posture. We try to emulate their specific type of anointing. But God isn't looking for cheap imitations. As the word says, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. In the very chapter where David is anointed, God bypassed the most visually impressive brothers. He chose the most authentic one. The cost and the reward of truth. Why are we so terrified of being ourselves? Because authenticity leaves no place to hide. It puts our quirks, our limits, our scars, and our unconventional journeys on full display. And somewhere along the line, we were fed the lie that being different was dangerous. Yet look at David. His experience as a lowly shepherd, the very thing his older brothers mocked, became his ultimate tactical advantage. He boldly declared, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep." Never forget, the very thing people overlook or despise in you might just be your divine qualification. When you walk in authenticity, it acts as a natural filter. You won't charm everyone, but you will act like a magnet for the right people. Jesus himself was fiercely authentic. He never sugar-coated his message just to win a popularity contest. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Authenticity liberates you, and by extension, it gives others the permission to be free as well. Toxic relationships and broken systems, on the other hand, feed on the fake. They require manipulation, fear, codependency, and everyone playing their assigned roles to survive. The second you drop the mask, certain people will distance themselves. Certain environments will suddenly feel hostile. Unhealthy dynamics will shatter. And that is exactly how it should be. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Choosing spiritual nonconformity will inevitably create friction with the world. David would eventually become a king, but his leadership was forever defined by his raw realness. This is a man who danced wildly before the Ark of the Covenant, a man who wept openly in public, a man who penned gut-wrenching psalms crying out, "Create in me a pure heart, O God." A truly authentic leader doesn't play a part. They embody a deep, unshakable consistency. Let's not romanticize it. Authenticity comes with a heavy price tag. It might cost you a lucrative promotion. It might cost you the validation of your peers. It might cost you a fake, fragile peace, or fleeting popularity. But it spares you from the worst fate of all, internal fragmentation. When you wear a mask for too long, you eventually dissociate from your own soul. God desires inner wholeness for you. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. True integrity is nothing more than total inner alignment, standing firm under pressure. So, how do we cultivate this audacity to be ourselves? Start by identifying your invisible armors. Acknowledge your natural, God-given gifts. Make peace with the fact that you aren't meant to be liked by everyone. Seek the applause of heaven far above the applause of the crowd. As Paul wrote, "If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." David didn't win despite being authentic. He won because of it. His sling looked like a joke to the world, but it was perfectly tailored to him. What looks small and insignificant in your life can become a weapon of mass destruction against darkness when placed in the hands of God. Maybe God is whispering to you right now. Take off the armor of comparison. Unbuckle the armor of fear. Drop the armor of keeping up appearances. Just bring your sling. Because David didn't defeat the giant by transforming into Saul. He won by remaining David. But there is another critical layer to this. Maintaining your authenticity when the system places you in a pressure cooker. It's easy to be authentic when the sun is shining. It's easy to be yourself when the crowd is cheering. But who are you when the heat is turned up? Who are you when your unwavering integrity threatens the status quo? When your standard of excellence exposes the mediocrity of others? Or when your very presence disrupts an unjust balance of power? That is the moment authenticity stops being a cute concept. It becomes an act of open resistance. There are toxic environments that won't explicitly ask you to lie, but they will implicitly demand that you shut up, shrink down, turn a blind eye, and absorb the dysfunction. They will offer you a brand new set of armor, the armor of strategic silence, of quiet docility, of endless compromise, of just keeping your head down. But do not confuse godly wisdom with cowardly erasure. Without diving into the specifics, you have walked through the fire of legal and formal battles. You had every opportunity to play the victim. You could have launched public attacks, dragged names through the mud, retaliated, collapsed entirely, or picked up the dirty weapons of the system fighting against you. But you didn't. You chose quiet dignity. You chose restraint. You chose unshakable consistency, calm firmness, and fierce authenticity. You refused to put on the armor of unchecked aggression, the armor of complicit silence, or the armor of petty revenge. You stayed true to who you are, and that in itself is a devastating weapon. There is a subtle, grinding pressure in this world, a slow erosion of your confidence, constantly broadcasting the implicit message, fall in line. In the trenches of those moments, your authenticity becomes an act of spiritual warfare. Jesus himself refused to bow to the system. The truth will set you free. Truth is a liberator, but it is also a massive disruptor. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you. That persecution isn't always physical. It can be administrative, institutional, psychological, or corporate. But Jesus never once altered his divine identity just to dodge rejection. Authenticity in the face of glaring injustice means stubbornly refusing to turn into the monster you are fighting. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. True dignity is a posture of supreme inner authority. When your soul is aligned, you cannot be manipulated. You cannot be bought. You cannot be bullied into submission. When David faced Goliath, he didn't try to scream louder than the giant. He simply stood his ground and said, "I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Your identity must precede your victory. Understand this. There are public, visible victories, and there are private, invisible ones. Sometimes, the greatest triumph isn't the final verdict or the bottom line. The greatest victory is simply this: you stayed aligned. You didn't sell out your core values. You didn't abandon the call on your life. You didn't trade your soul's authenticity for a cheap, temporary truce. And that kind of integrity is one of the most powerful weapons you will ever wield. Finally, we must look at the everyday, mundane dimension of this. It is entirely possible to be a massive success on the outside while slowly dying on the inside. You can rack up the titles, the glowing reviews, the big contracts, and the standing ovations, all while completely losing your voice, losing your spiritual discernment, your inner peace, your drive, and your joy. Authenticity is not a catchy slogan. It is a rigorous discipline, a daily practice, a choice you have to make again and again. It is built in the tiny, repetitive, invisible decisions you make when no one is watching. A life lived authentically makes you virtually unstoppable because it brings you into total alignment. You are no longer an easy target for manipulation. You are no longer trapped in a cycle of constantly defending and justifying yourself. You are no longer exhausted from playing a character. Your ultimate victory will never be found in imitation. It will only be found in alignment. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and he will make your paths straight. Take an inventory today. Identify your modern-day armors. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you have to be absolutely flawless just to earn a shred of respect. Maybe you believe you have to be perpetually sweet and agreeable. Maybe you think staying completely silent is the only way to survive. Hear me clearly. God is not asking you for perfection. He is demanding your truth. Setting a boundary and saying no doesn't make you a villain. Staying quiet out of sheer terror will eventually become your prison. Practice what I call a calm authenticity. Jesus spoke the absolute truth without ever begging the crowd for their validation. Learn to build solid boundaries without drowning in guilt. Above all else, guard your heart. Swap out the exhausting pursuit of human validation for the restful assurance of God's approval. If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Start praying a simple prayer. Lord, give me the grace to remain dignified and perfectly aligned with you. Learn to discern between relationships that want you to be real and relationships that only want you to be useful. Authenticity is the ultimate litmus test for the people in your life. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Pick your battles wisely, but never negotiate your core identity at the bargaining table. Remember that sometimes the ultimate act of perseverance is knowing when to walk away with your head held high. And if the trials of this life have left you bruised and bleeding, refuse to let your heart grow hard. God doesn't allow the fire to turn you into stone. He uses the fire to give you deep, unshakable roots. He heals the brokenhearted. Dignity is not the suppression of your emotions. Dignity is the quiet confidence of knowing exactly who is steering your ship. The world is desperate for people who are compliant, uniform, and easy to control. But God is searching for people who are deeply rooted, fiercely clear-eyed, and perfectly aligned. When you walk in your authentic truth, you stop scattering your energy. You stop selling yourself short. You stop betraying your own soul. You están taller. You begin to look like David, perhaps unimpressive according to the flashy metrics of the world, but powerful according to the standards of heaven. The Lord is my strength and my shield. If this message resonated with you, if you feel seen in that silent struggle between the heavy mask and the liberating truth, between the grip of fear and the peace of alignment, remember this. God never called you to be a copy. He called you to be you. Healed, dignified, profoundly authentic, and powerfully anchored in Him. And if you found value in this word today, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs it. Because you never know who is quietly scrolling right now, praying for the courage to reclaim their voice. May God bless you abundantly, and I'll see you very soon in the next video.